Hi, and welcome to Horror Recap. In today's video, we will be delving into the 2007 film, The Mist. This film tells the story of a terrifying mist that harbors horrible creatures who wreak havoc on a sleepy town. Watch out, spoilers ahead. Enjoy. We begin with watching David painting in his studio as a terrible storm rages on outside. When the electric cuts out, David, Steph, and Billy head down to their basement to wait out the storm. Once they go down there, we see a tree burst through the studio window, and the next day, we see that the whole tree had actually been uprooted. Suddenly, Billy runs up and tells them to come look at the boathouse that's been demolished. Sure enough, they see that his neighbor's tree fell over and crushed the boathouse, and they notice the mist rolling in from across the lake. They dismiss the mist as a natural phenomenon, and David heads over to his neighbor, Brent, to get insurance information. When he sees Brent, he notices that he too had a little bad luck of his own, as his car also has a tree on it now. After agreeing to trade insurance information, Brent asks for a ride into town, and David obliges. On their way into town, they see that the military has come down from the base on the mountain, and they are coming in big numbers. Once at the grocery store, we meet Sally, who tells David that the generators are running, but they are only supplying power to the freezer. Then we meet Ollie as he greets the town cook, Mrs. Carmody. As they wait in line to check out, they notice the military men walk in, but suddenly the military police show up to retrieve them. He tells them that they've all been called back to the base. As the MP leaves, the sirens wail in the town. We meet Dan, who runs in and screams that there's something in the mist. He warns them to close the doors. As the mist rolls in, one man decides to try and make it to his car, but they soon hear his screams come from the parking lot. As silence falls over the town, Mrs. Carmody calls the mist death, and the entire building rumbles as though an earthquake has hit the town. As they start to question how to handle the situation, everyone decides to stay and wait to see what happens, but one woman decides to brave the mist and make it home to her kids. The group watches as she disappears into the mist. Then David takes Billy away from the windows to try and console him. As time passes, everyone starts to get cozy, and David is introduced to Amanda, who is new to the town. David asks Ollie for a blanket for Billy, and Ollie mentions that there are some furniture pads in the back room. As David heads for the back room, he notices Brent is gathering a group of people and discussing how to go about leaving. When David makes it to the back room, he finds the generator smoking, and he shuts it off. Back out with the rest of the people, Mrs. Carmody is telling everyone that this is Judgment Day. Meanwhile, David hears something pushing on the metal roll-up door from outside, and he runs back to the store when it starts banging harder. The group goes to investigate the generator, and Jim and Myron conclude that there is something backing it up from outside. The bag boy volunteers to go out and clear it, but David and Ollie don't think it's a good idea to open the door. Eventually, their word doesn't matter, and the bag boy raises the door to go out. Just when they think it might be safe, a tentacle reaches in and grabs the boy. It tries to pull him out, but David grabs hold of his hand. The tentacle starts eating pieces of the bag boy, and Ollie grabs the fire axe. When they go to close the door, the bag boy gets sucked out, but David takes the fire axe to cut off a piece of the tentacles. Jim gives a nonsense reason for why he ignored David, but David doesn't buy it, and he makes that clear. He tells them to go back in the store, but he makes sure they know not to tell anyone anything yet. When they gather to talk about how to proceed, Ollie reminds them that the whole front of the store is plate glass, and there is nothing else keeping any of those creatures out. David decides to convince Brent of what just happened, but that proves to be a bit harder than they expected. Even after the other guys back up his story, Brent still doesn't believe any of this. David tries to talk him into coming to the back, but Brent makes it way more difficult than it should be. So Ollie simply calls everyone over to hear the story, and they talk a few of the people into going and investigating the tentacle chunk. After they poke it, the chunk dissolves away, and they go back to verify the story to the rest of the people. Everyone rallies together to barricade the windows. After praying for guidance, Mrs. Carmody realizes that she's there to try to save the souls of those in the store. She goes out to preach to everyone, and she seems to get through to a handful of them. Afterwards, Billy asks the soldiers to get their other friends to come save them, but he's interrupting a private conversation they are having. All of a sudden, Brent comes through with his group of followers, and he tells everyone that they are leaving the store. David tries to talk him out of it one more time, but doesn't succeed. He asks him to take a rope to let them know he had made it at least that far. The biker speaks up and says he'll do it, because he believes they need the shotgun that's in one of the customers' trucks. After the rope gains some slack, it suddenly gets pulled out at a crazy speed, and they do their best to hold on to it. As the rope gets pulled up into the sky, it goes limp again. David starts pulling it in, but eventually they see that they're only pulling half of the biker's body back. Later, Sally meets up with one of the soldier boys, Wayne, and they seem to reconnect an old flame from high school. The rest of the store settles in for the night, but soon, giant bug-like creatures start flying out the window. As they slam into the glass, Ollie begins to piece together that the bugs are attracted to the light. They can't turn the lights off quick enough, and soon, the store is breached. Sally is stung, and she ends up having a reaction that eventually kills her. Meanwhile, Ollie chases one of the predators through the store with a gun, and David sets another on fire before beating it to death. After they clear the store, they see the aftermath of what just happened, and Mrs. Carmody gains more followers as she was proven right from what she said before. That night, everyone sleeps, but some people have it a little worse. We see that the woman that was supposed to be watching Billy has actually committed suicide, and one of the others was burnt so badly that they are considering running to the pharmacy next door to look for medication. David also brings up the idea of leaving before Mrs. Carmody gathers much more of a congregation. As the group leaves, the tension seems thicker than the mist. After walking for a distance, they come across the pharmacy, and they see that they left the doors open before the mist came in. They split up to gather supplies and medicine, but they soon hear a scurrying sound. When they look up, they see a bug strung up in webbing. It freaks Jim out so much that he panics, but they come across the MP strung up in webbing, who cries out that it's their fault. As they go to help him, giant spider eggs seem to hatch inside his skin. They fight their way out of the pharmacy, but not before taking some casualties. Back at the store, things are tense and many are ready to leave. David finds Wayne, and they go in search of other soldiers. When they go into the stockroom, they find the other two soldiers had hung themselves, and Jim sneaks in and pulls Wayne out to face Mrs. Carmody. Wayne tries to explain that he isn't actually involved with the experiments, but he remembers hearing how they were trying to reach other dimensions on the mountain. After hearing this, Mrs. Carmody rallies her supporters into stabbing Wayne and throwing him out into the mist to feed the beasts. After they lock the doors, they hear one of the creatures approaching through the mist, and after a final plea for mercy, the beast snatches him up. That night, Billy makes David promise to never let the monsters get him, and they go back to sleep. Next, David is awoken by Amanda to gather food and leave, but they are met by Mrs. Carmody, who refuses to let them leave. As the rest of the people gather around them, they realize that they will try to sacrifice Billy to please the beast. As violence breaks out, Ollie decides that he's had enough of it, and he shoots Mrs. Carmody. Quickly, they make their way out the door and rush for the car. Once in the mist, some of them get split up, but Ollie makes it to the car first and opens the doors. His celebration is short-lived when a monster pops up and eats him right in front of the rest of the group. Finally, David, Billy, Irene, Dale, and Amanda make it to the car, and they quickly realize that they are the last ones left. Before they set off, David goes back out to get Ollie's gun, and they set off. They drive right by the store windows, so everyone inside can see that they made it okay. They make their way to David's house, and he sees that his wife is not alive anymore. After David mourns his wife's passing, he sets off once again, and they see just how far the devastation of the mist has reached. As they drive, they see the majesty of some of the creatures as they cross their path and mind their own business. Eventually, the gas tank takes them as far as they can, but it still wasn't enough to get them out of the mist. After grasping the despair of their situation, David takes a look at everyone to make sure they're in agreement, and he counts how many rounds are left in the gun. After realizing there are only 4, he comes up with the plan that he'll figure something out for himself. As Billy wakes up, we hear David take 4 shots, and he cries out as he's the only one left now. After coming to terms with what he's just done, he leaves the car and screams for the creature to come and take him. Soon, he hears a loud bellow in the distance, and he gets ready for a creature to take him. It's only after a tank and soldiers appear through the mist that David realizes the irony of the situation. As a truck with survivors drives by, he notices the woman that left the store in the beginning had safely made it to her children, and they are all alive and well. As David drops to his knees, he realizes that he just killed everyone in the car for nothing. There was no purpose to his mercy killings, and if he had just waited a few more minutes, they would have been saved. That's the end of this film recap. We hope you've enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can watch any of our other horror film recaps.